Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Aileen Ryan. I'm the president of the RAIN Alliance. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. I will just give it about a minute while people are still joining the platform before we go ahead and get started. But thank you for joining us. Super, I can see lots of people joining us now. So we will go ahead and get started in just another 10, 20 seconds or so. Great. Okay, I think we'll go ahead now, David, if that's okay with you. So welcome everyone to our webinar. Joining me today on this webinar is our friend David Krebs from VDC Research. As you possibly know, RAIN Alliance commissions a market research report completely focused on the deployment of RAIN RFID globally. This is the third such report, I believe, that we have commissioned and worked with VDC Research on. And it's just recently been published and it's available on the RAIN Alliance website for sale. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to bring David along today to give you some insight into what he observed and has documented in this market research report and answer some questions. So the format of the webinar is going to be primarily Q&A. We have prepared some questions in advance, but if you have some additional questions, please feel free to use the Q&A tab, which you should see in the bottom of your screen, and we will keep track of those and get to as many of them as we can. We expect the webinar to last somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes, so not too long. It is being recorded and it will be available for download from the RAIN Alliance website in 24 hours or so after it's just been post-processed. So with that, I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. I'll go ahead and get started. David Krebs from VDC Research. David, welcome. Really nice to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Eileen. And thanks to everyone on the bridge today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. So I'm just going to spend a minute or two introducing the research, providing a little bit of background on sort of the scope of the research, the methodology, maybe introducing a couple of high-level themes before we transition into the Q&A section of this webinar. So a lot of times we get asked, how do we go about conducting the research, and how do we go about putting together a lot of the market models and forecasts and just general assumptions around RAIN RFID solutions. So just to reiterate what Eileen had already mentioned, so we've been working with the RAIN Alliance for the last several years on producing a focused piece of research that looks at RAIN RFID technology specifically. There was, going back a couple of years, there was certainly market research that covered RFID, but it covered RFID more broadly, and it was I would say a little bit muddled, when looking at the different technologies and different use cases. So there was a clear need and a clear demand for something that the RAIN Alliance could point to that said sort of this is sort of the definitive piece of research that encapsulates the opportunity for RAIN RFID. So just a little bit on the methodology. How did we go about doing this? So again, this is our third version. So there's some history that we can lean on, in terms of conducting this research, and that's really where we start, with any of these processes is look at what we have previously published, look at some of the assumptions that we put together. Clearly, we have gone through a couple of years of quite volatile, market scenarios, coming through and out of COVID. So that certainly has had an impact on a variety of factors. So certainly looking at how that has played out now that we are on the tail end of that. So just reviewing those assumptions and letting them impact or seeing how they might influence our thinking with this most recent piece of research. There's obviously a lot of secondary research that goes into these reports, where we're looking at a lot of macro trends, everything from, for example, labor trends to industrial real estate investments, to consumption trends. So I think that, again, could directly or indirectly impact the categories that are being tagged with RAIN RFID technology, or where the technology may be implemented. And as part of that, we're always developing and refining sort of the research hypotheses as we go into the primary research phase of this engagement. So the primary research has really two elements to it. We're conducting in-depth interviews with a variety of stakeholders across the RAIN RFID ecosystem. So everyone from the tag IC to the inlay to the label converters to the systems integrators and software organizations that again are making investments in or supporting RAIN RFID solutions. And one thing that we did want to emphasize a little bit more in the most recent piece of research is really hearing more directly from end users that are making investments and are leveraging RAIN RFID technology. So made a concerted effort to talk to a variety of essentially decision makers within large retailers, supply chain, logistics organizations, manufacturing organizations, and really try to understand a little better behind sort of their investment strategies, their requirements from a technology performance, their requirements from an operational improvement perspective, and what they were seeing in terms of overall benefits and ROI. We did also conduct, as part of our sort of ongoing annual research into automatic identification technologies, we did have a large end user decision maker survey in which we asked a series of RFID related questions as well. So we were able to leverage that as part of this research. And then finally, as we conduct the research, as we start putting together our market models, we do a lot of validation through peer review and sharing sort of data and assumptions, and there's some refinement that happens before we actually go ahead and publish the research, which we just did a couple of weeks ago. The scope is for anyone who's seen the report in the past. The scope is quite similar. We want to make sure that there's consistency in coverage so that we can go back and sort of compare. And here I won't go through or read through each of these, but here are sort of the key technology and regional market and commercial segments that we use as our base segmentation model to provide market size and market forecast, market tracking efforts. So a couple of points, and some will tie quite closely into the questions that Eileen will pose as we get into the Q&A session. But a couple of takeaways, if you will, just to start this off. Investment in RAIN RFID technologies continues to be very healthy, very strong. The outlook from our perspective is still sort of pointing towards a double-digit growth scenario, whereby we are projecting on the IC level the market to reach within the forecast period of 5 years, the market to reach or exceed 100 billion units, which would obviously for this market be a significant milestone, considering just even the growth that we've seen over the last couple of years. I will say that even that number, as large as it sounds, still represents a smaller percentage of the total available opportunity. So I think there's still certainly significant upside opportunity as technology matures and use cases develop and organizations continue to leverage these investments. Another point is we certainly have started to see what I'm calling meaningful category diversification and application diversification, and we'll certainly spend some time talking about that in the Q&A session. But maybe the point on that is, the RFID market, the RAIN RFID market, has always been a diverse market from the standpoint of how the technology has been used, but it's also been very top heavy in terms of a lot of the volume was concentrated around a very small number of use cases and applications. And while some of that is certainly still true, we have seen that diversified to the point where the reliance on one category or the reliance on one application isn't outsized to significantly alter sort of the outlook of this market. So I think that that's certainly very important for this for this market moving forward, is to continue that diversification from a commercial and from an application standpoint. Third point, and this is not a new point, it's a sort of a continuation of a trend, but certainly sort of this idea of hands-free and trying to automate repetitive workflows that that do involve labor in logistics, in retail and delivery and manufacturing environments, is certainly driving and continues to sort of drive the shift in reader infrastructure configuration from handheld to fixed. Handheld readers are still prevalent, will continue to be, but there certainly is a desire, and we've seen that in investments to address the issue of manual scanning and introduce RFID as a means of eliminating that need for manual line of sight scanning. So that's certainly a key theme as we look at this technology and the role of this technology, across various landscapes. And then the final one, and this is maybe more of a longer term one, but I think a very, very important one for sure, is this extension from sort of supply chain operations to product lifecycle management, or more comprehensive lifecycle management, in terms of sort of an investment narrative. Supply chain optimization and sort of operational performance improvements, will continue to be, sort of key investment themes. But with efforts like digital product passports, probably at the sort of at the top of that list, there is a desire to have greater sort of life cycle management attached to a variety of different merchandise or product types to address a variety, or to provide a variety of benefits, everything from certainly customer engagement, but also from a circularity perspective. So the role of RFID in supporting that, of RAIN RFID in supporting that, I think will be certainly an interesting one to follow. So with that, I'll I guess hand this back over to you, Aileen, to kick off the Q&A session.
Thanks, David. Super introduction. So the first question really is from our own members at the RAIN Alliance. We know that there were around 45 billion RAIN RFID chips shipped in 2023, and your research validates and refines that number, and also talks about projections about what the next few years are likely to look like from a volume point of view. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so as I had suggested or said in the introduction section, that volume growth certainly at the IC level, but also at the inlay and the tag level, in addition to the reader level, continues to be positive and continues to be strong over the course of the next forecast period. And again, a milestone of 100 billion units is attainable, within that, or we expect it to be hit within that forecast period. There are a couple of, I guess, maybe nuances to point out on that. And in looking at the most recent, shipment volumes and the correlation between tag IC volumes and inlay volumes and finished tag volumes, in 2023 certainly was a little different than it was in prior years. And what we did see was that, while tag volumes grew at a very high level, or tag IC volumes grew at a very high level in 2023, shipments of inlays and finished tags or labels were slower, as the inlay vendors as well as the tag vendors were sort of taking on inventory, and that was function of a number of factors, and we'll get into them in more detail in the next couple of questions. So I think that sort of drove some I guess irregularities is one way of describing it, but sort of differences in terms of sort of follow through performance. What we have also been going through, and I think we've now sort of gone through, is a period of inflationary pricing. So we have seen, this has been a market that has fairly consistently, as volumes have increased, prices have come down, and that has been, a pretty regular trend over the course of the last 8 to 10, 5 to 8 years of this market. Over the last couple of years, that has been different, certainly as inflation has impacted everything from logistics costs to component costs, etc. So our expectations is that sort of hit a peak, is now coming down again, but will also sort of, I think, level off over the sort of the course of the forecast period, so that while volumes will certainly impact sort of pricing, we aren't going to see sort of the same historical price declines or ASP declines, and that's a function of a variety of factors. Certainly, I think in the past, sort of diversity and mix has been a factor here, as higher performance tags and the share of higher performance tags increased, certainly impacted ASPs, but there's overall cost of silicon wafers in general, I think will factor in there. But it's good to see that sort of the inflationary pricing period has sort of has wound down, if you will. The other thing, certainly on the RAIN RFID IC level, what we're starting to see is also diversification in the competitive landscape. Although this is a market that has been, there's a couple of very strong players here, we are starting to see some diversification here, increased sort of competition here, that is also, I think, beginning to, not necessarily challenge the outlook, but certainly have an impact as well in terms of the sort of the longer term nature of this business.
Thanks, David. The next question is, you've got one of your key takeaways here around the topic of diversification. So RAIN tags being applied to a wider set of product categories within retail and without retail, of course, as well, and enabling an extended range of use cases. Could you give us some examples?
Yes, certainly. So, I mean, I think, one of the points that we were, I was making earlier on the introductory comments was that RAIN RFID adoption has always been, extremely diverse in terms of the use cases and the applications. But certainly when you're looking at volumes and concentration of volumes over the last couple of years, it's been very much tied to retail and store inventory, and more specifically apparel inventory. And one interesting point that we did, I did want to mention, that we saw last year was certainly a slowdown in the second half of the year of the apparel category. But while demand diminished for apparel, or shipments or imports of apparel into large consuming regions such as Europe and North America declined in the second half of last year, it certainly impacted demand for RAIN RFID, but not to the point where it sort of brought the market down, if you will, or created a contraction in terms of shipment volumes. So the market was able to, again, sort of overcome that decline, that softness in demand in that sort of key category. And that was, sort of a key indicator that the diversification across merchandise categories was certainly playing the role. So within retail, and again, this is not super new, but now we're starting to see the volumes behind it, sort of the diversification beyond apparel and footwear into categories like electronics, like home goods, like jewelry, like eyewear, even books, I think is offsetting or creating a sort of a much more stable and a much healthier category. One thing that we also saw, and I think is certainly important, especially as we look at some of the sort of the bigger themes impacting organizations moving forward, is that retailers that have made investments in RAIN RFID solutions and you look at the performance of those retailers across a variety of metrics, everything from sort of inventory turns to, all the way to bottom line profitability. There was, and it's always hard to make sort of the direct correlation, but certainly retailers that were more sort of mature or active adopters or investors in RAIN RFID solutions, certainly through the pandemic, but even beyond the pandemic, tended to operate, at a much higher level and perform at a much higher level, both operationally and also across sort of economic metrics. Within retail or within the retail facility, certainly the key theme here is also sort of expansion of the use case of RAIN RFID from very sort of inventory or inventory visibility related applications to sort of additional use cases. The two primary ones that continue to lead that narrative, that charge, is certainly at the point of sale. So we're certainly seeing retailers, some at a higher level than others, look to integrate RFID at the point of sale register in support of everything from traditional point of sale to self-checkout related applications. Loss has obviously been a big theme in retail over the last couple of years, with organized retail crime being a challenge for retailers, and how to address that. So we've started to see a decent amount of innovation around sort of the coupling of the inventory intelligence that retailers receive from their RAIN RFID investments with loss solutions, and the utilization of RAIN RFID, not for loss prevention so much, but certainly loss detection is sort of the term that everyone points to, and really trying to, using portal readers at entry exit points to better understand and sort of manage loss. We have seen, when you're looking at traditional loss prevention technologies and their coexistence with RAIN RFID, we certainly are seeing some demand for sort of dual EAS RFID tags. Volumes today, we estimated about 2 billion units. So not insignificant, but certainly a portion of the market. It's hard to say whether or not RAIN RFID will, over time displace traditional loss prevention technologies. Right now, we see it more of coexistence, although investment is stronger for RAIN RFID infrastructure in the retail store. We certainly saw also improvements in the portal readers, or the performance of portal readers, to address, to better read, items as they left through those entry exit points. So I think that also has addressed some of the sort of historical challenges, if you will, for that. So again, diversification of merchandise categories, yes. Check that box, that continues. Expansion of the use cases, yes. But then also, outside of the retail store or more upstream, we're certainly seeing, organizations say, okay, I'm already tagging items with RAIN RFID. How do I better take advantage, if you will, of those investments that I'm making, within my logistics infrastructure? So within distribution facilities and more from a supply chain perspective, as goods come in and out of warehouse and distribution centers. So I think that source tagging, that obviously is key to retail investment, is also extending itself to sort of broader logistics use cases within those organizations.
Thanks, David. The next question I had was looking outside of retail. So what does the report tell us about adoption in other sectors? And we have a specific question from one of our attendees today asking about the food sector. So if you could maybe build the food response into the answer.
Yeah. I'll make sure to mention food, but I'll start with sort of logistics was, outside of traditional retail in-store, logistics was sort of the biggest, or has been sort of the biggest sort contributor to RAIN RFID investment over the last couple of years. So that's both logistics operations overall and certainly in parcel delivery. And I think we all know who some of the big names are in terms of what they've been doing, what they've been talking about. And so what we found interesting and what we're seeing in logistics is, just to pick up on a couple of the earlier themes, is it's while the initial investments are very much driven around sort of operational improvement initiatives. So we're seeing sort of the idea of elimination of manual scans as we're loading trucks to to address overall productivity, labor productivity, to reduce misloads, to help with claims and fraud detection. Those are some of the sort of the key benefits that we're seeing there. We're also seeing, sort of inventory management within the confines of the vehicle. So the amount of time a driver might spend looking for an item that they're about to deliver. So again, very operations-driven metrics, but we're starting to see, and we saw this in baggage handling as well. Just as a sidebar, the notion of NPS and customer engagement and customer satisfaction as a sort of a key criteria, for organizations making these investments. It's not just, and clearly there's a byproduct of, if I'm operating more efficiently and more accurately as a business, I'll be delivering a better service. But the emphasis on NPS, the emphasis on customer engagement, customer satisfaction, as it directly relates to investments in solutions like RAIN RFID, certainly has been an interesting theme that we saw. And again, on the baggage handling side, which is a key application, perhaps has slowed a little bit in terms of its momentum, but the airlines that have made those investments, with a focus on customer engagement and using the data that they are collecting to inform and update and again engage with customers, are the ones that have seen perhaps the best success with these investments. On the food side, food is I don't want to suggest it's a bit of a holy grail, but certainly presents some very interesting opportunities. So there are a couple of elements to this. I think the use cases around food that have been most prevalent or most mature certainly are in the areas of quick serve restaurants that are, again, doing something very similar to what we're seeing sort of with retail. And it's very much an inventory management, receipt of goods type of application, into their facilities, to sort of be aware of what we're receiving and then to turn around sort of or to expedite sort of the receiving workflow. Into more sort of traditional foods areas, we are starting to certainly see sort of the tagging of trays and sort of food delivery. So while it might not be on the item level, certainly on the level of conveyance, we're certainly starting to see that. We're starting to see that also in quick serve as they automate some of their processes. So the receipt of food and the tagging of the crates and the trays that the food's being delivered on is certainly something that is growing from our perspective, and will continue to grow over the course of the forecast period. Beyond food and manufacturing, we're certainly and continue to see a fairly diverse set of use cases. I think condition-based monitoring is one that we're increasingly seeing, whereby organizations are combining RFID with temperature, with shock, with vibration sensors, to monitor the condition of items, especially of fragile items, to identify if and where damage does occur. They have a better sort of accounting of that. Counterfeit goods and countering counterfeit goods and product authentication is depending on sort of the sector is I think a very rapidly expanding area. We saw this in the aerospace sector, for example, where spare parts and ensuring the sort of the authenticity of the spare parts is a critical requirement. So we're seeing some very interesting innovation happening there with RAIN RFID. Another one is, and again, it's a bit of an inventory one, but it's an inventory one associated with sort of on vehicle inventory compliance. So in areas like first responders, like ambulances and fire trucks that need to respond quickly to emergencies, they want to also make sure that what they have in their vehicles is what they need to have in their vehicles to get out as quickly as possible. So they don't want that to be a manual process. If they can streamline that and validate that faster, that means they can get on the road faster. So we've seen that in ambulance, we've seen that in fire, we're seeing that in even the loading of airlines or airplanes before they go. All of the items and all of the inventory they need to prior to taking off. So again, it just goes back to that sort of diversification story. I mean, there's always been that, but I think just sort of the volume and the validity of those use cases as they mature, and sort of the ROI models that organizations are able to point to, has certainly a scaling impact, across a lot of these spaces.
Thanks, David. Slightly different question now. So the RAIN Alliance recently published a separate report on bridging the gap between corporate sustainability goals and RAIN RFID implementations. And it's clear that some people have made that connection already, and that there's a lot of opportunity in this space. And there's also work to be done by RAIN Alliance and RAIN Alliance members and others in order to really tighten the linkage between RAIN RFID implementations and sustainability goals. It's a topic that we have a lot of people interested in, actually, within the RAIN Alliance community. So related to sustainability, first of all, did you see any differences in your research this time from the previous report, which we published about 18 months ago? And is there any segment that's driving the use of RAIN for sustainability?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question. It's an important question, and it's one that I think will be central to sort of future opportunity for this technology over the course of the next couple of years. So just a couple of sort of, I guess, comments before I directly answer, sort of the question. I think, it's well documented that, organizations across, a variety of sectors, be it everything from health and beauty to apparel to other types of consumer goods, that waste in the supply chain is a very continues to be a very real issue. And organizations are either internally or through mandates are certainly being pressured to operate in a more sustainable way, and to address ESG goals in a very meaningful way. So we've done research on this topic. We've identified, based on some studies that we did about a year and a half ago, that across, I think, 5 core categories, that you were able to count about $80 billion in annual waste, supply chain waste, through excess inventory, damaged inventory, poor operations, etc. We have found that, again, going back to earlier points, that we made around retail performance, we have found that organizations that tend to have tighter control of their supply chain have greater visibility into their operations and the operations of their trading partners, and share that data, tend to perform better overall, but also are able to operate in a leaner way, and are able to sort of address some of the waste that is otherwise being created due to the factors that I just mentioned. So I think there's fairly strong evidence tying, again, sort of the ability to drive operational visibility into supply chain resilience, and into the ability for organizations to operate in a more sustainable way. And I think that evidence will, will certainly, only grow. We are also, at the same time, as I mentioned before, this extension from supply chain to product lifecycle management, we are seeing initiatives such as the digital product passport from the EU drive, sort of mandates around, the ability to track and manage products throughout their entire life cycle through production, delivery, consumption, and end of life decommissioning. And are looking to use ID technologies to support that life cycle management. So we do see the circularity aspect of that, as it correlates to sustainability from a recyclability perspective, etc. That RAIN RFID as a ID technology has a role to play there, and we'll see how that over time ultimately shakes out. But I think that we are certainly seeing the attention to sustainability as a driving factor that either directly or indirectly brings technologies such as RAIN RFID into the equation grow. A little bit of the cynic in me will say, be a little bit careful from the standpoint of how far we want to reach out or extend ourselves on this point, because while sustainability is always going to be important when asked directly, when it means that it means that it's going to cost me more as a business or cost me more as a consumer. In some categories, yes, we might be able to overcome that, but generally speaking, I think the market is also looking for solutions to address sustainability that won't necessarily directly cost me more or may erode sort of the performance of the application of the technology, if that makes any sense. So I think that it's there's a little bit of a balancing act to play there. We've certainly heard a little bit more sort of noise around the notion of the RAIN RFID tag and inlay from the standpoint of recyclability and what does this do to a product if attached to it, and so I think we're seeing the industry respond here as well. I think that the benefits of just operational benefits of RAIN RFID sort of overcome any of those those waste challenges, but they also have to be addressed by this community. So we are starting to see investments in sort of eco-friendly labels and the use of sort of paper and other types of materials for this technology. So again, I think it's certainly something for the industry that that needs to be clearly communicated and addressed. But our position here is really that the benefits of technologies such as RAIN RFID on operations and operations to or organizations to operate in a much more sustainable way, far outweigh many of the challenges that sort of the quote unquote recyclability of an RFID tag may introduce.
Thanks, David. So we're coming up on 40 minutes now, and I'm keen to get us wrapped up in the next 5-ish or so minutes. So if we have any other questions that people want to ask, please post them in the Q&A. David, I want to back you up just by a couple of minutes, really back onto the subject of product lifecycle management. And there's a question that's come in, which I'm sort of linking with a question that I had already prepared. So product lifecycle management, in some cases, will potentially drive adoption of embedded tags, or at least tags that are durable, which can survive the product lifespan. And can you tell us a little bit more about this trend? And then the specific question that's come in is, have you any insight from the research that you've done into what that might do to pricing?
Yes, no, that's a great question, and obviously a very important one. So one of the themes that we took a much closer look at in the research this time is this notion of embedded tags, and sort of the opportunity, to tie the tag to the item throughout the item's or life cycle. So, and again, going back to sort of that circularity benefits and efforts like DPP, I think they're certainly closely linked, to that. So we are seeing certainly advances in the opportunity or demand for embedded RAIN RFID tags. The obvious examples to point to include the efforts that have been made in the tire space, and certainly the while the majority of tires today are, from a RAIN RFID tag perspective, are labeled, but we certainly do see we do see the sort of the integration of the RAIN RFID tag within the tire wall as being as being sort of a great example of what this might look like over the course of time. Seen certainly advances in sort of fabric-based inlays, if you will, for lack of a better definition, or fiber-based solutions that can more seamlessly integrate into a garment, and do so in a way that, Eileen, to your point, is can withstand sort of wash and tumble cycles, which has been obviously a challenge for the technology in the past. So certainly performance improvements and enhancements there. Even on the side of primary labeling, we've seen certainly the response to mandates to label merchandise items has been, well, let's just slap a label onto the product and that'll at least satisfy that in the near term. Obviously, the product management and marketing people, they're not so happy with that. So, excuse me, the integration of the inlay into the primary label is another way that we're seeing, technically, or quote unquote, sort of a not quite embedded, but almost embedded, tag. In terms of pricing, yes, the pricing, these are sort of specialty tags. The volumes right now, I mean, we have some, volume projections in the report around sort of embedded tags versus, hang tags or just, labels and things of that nature. It's, starting from a, certainly a smaller base, but going back to the earlier comment on, what impacts pricing, certainly volume has been the most significant impact on pricing over the course of the last, 5 to 8 years in this space. But with demand for diversification around applications, around higher performance tags, or things like embedded tags, they will, there will be a premium associated with those, and as those volumes then go up, that will also go through that sort of volume-based price erosion cycle. But certainly there is a premium associated with some of the embedded variants that are available in the market today, and as a share of shipments, I mean, that's increasing, but it's coming off of a relatively small base today.
Thanks, David. We're through all the questions that have come in from our audience, so I'm going to bring us to a close, but just ask you one final question, if you don't mind. If you had one key takeaway for members of the RAIN Alliance community, what would it be? So I'll try to be brief in my comment here, but my comment is really around sort of the maturity of this space, and sort of the awareness of RAIN RFID as a viable ID technology. As I said earlier, 45 billion tag ICs is a large number, and on our way to 100 billion ICs is a significant milestone. But it's in terms of taggable items, it's still a relatively small share. But that being said, I think that RAIN RFID technology has matured significantly. I think the connection of the technology to large organizations and their investments and the benefits that they've realized
is certainly created significant awareness around the technology. Right? So I think, you know, a key point for the Alliance moving forward will be to continue to position RAIN RFID as a viable ID technology and continue to sort of document sort of those benefits, especially you know, especially in the context of alternative ID technologies. And the reason I'm sort of calling this out is, you know, with efforts like, you know, DPP, you know, they aren't specifying ID technologies. There is none. I mean, there are maybe recommending several, but just to make sure that, you know, the RAIN RFID technologies are understood in the context of those mandates and of those discussions moving forward. So I think that is, you know, a large opportunity, but also a key requirement for this, you know, for this market going moving forward.
Thanks, David. Thank you very much. It was really insightful. Thank you for the report. Thank you for the webinar. And as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, the report is available for purchase on the RAIN Alliance website. And hopefully you've had enough interesting points to want to dig deeper and go and find it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eileen. Thanks, everyone.